Christ is risen. You know, Easter comes with lots of emotions. Emotions of rejoicing. But while they're leaving here, can we thank our praise team for their work today? We are so gifted with people here that just help us worship. Because Easter brings these moments of rejoicing. It's a joyous day. It also is a day that brings emotions of celebration, right? I mean, like, we look good today, right? I mean, you put that pastel color on, you try to fit into a suit that you only wear every once in a while, right? And you look good. You gather together with your family and we celebrate. Maybe we celebrate a little bit too much, so we say, hey, we're gonna go on a diet starting tomorrow, right? Which leads to another emotion that we sometimes experience on Easter, this moment and this emotion of accomplishment. For some of you, you have withheld from something for 40 plus days, and today's the day that you get to look at social media or eat chocolate for the first time. Easter comes with lots of emotions. But did you hear the emotions that the women experienced on that first Easter Sunday? Look at it here in Mark chapter 16. Mark writes this in verse 8. And they, the women, went out and fled from the tomb, for trembling and astonishment had seized them. And they said nothing to anyone, for they were afraid. Not rejoicing or celebration or accomplishment. Mark tells us that they experienced these emotions that were held together, trembling and astonishment. And what if I were to tell you today, Easter 2024, that we too should be experiencing these emotions as well? Trembling and astonishment. Because we will experience these, trembling and astonishment, when we experience our God. Let me explain. There was this English philosopher by the name of Anthony Flew. Anthony is a brilliant guy. As a philosopher, he was one that was respected in his field. And Anthony was also somebody who was very outspoken in his belief that God was not real. He was an atheist. And Anthony, he wasn't some Facebook troll that hid behind some anonymous name or some kind of keyboard warrior. No, he was a guy who debated the greatest philosophers on stage to prove that God did not exist. And then in 2007, he wrote a book that shocked everybody. The title of the book is this. You can read it. It's called There Is a God: How the World's Most Notorious Atheist Changed His Mind. Has anybody read this book by chance? It was popular many years ago. Okay, something worth reading. And Flew, in this book, he raises this question that's a phenomenal question that I think every human being needs to wrestle with, including us here today. He says, I therefore put to my former fellow atheists the simple central question: what would have to occur or to have occurred to constitute for you a reason to at least consider the existence of a superior mind? What Flew is asking is he's saying, what would have to occur or to have occurred for you to think beyond yourself, beyond your plan, and what you have for life. Because we have plans in life, right? I mean, we want that good job. We want to be married. We want to have the 2.5 kids and have the house and the retirement investments that just help us sail smoothly towards the end of our life. But Flew asks the question, what would have to happen for you to think outside of those plans? Because when we experience God, we will start thinking outside of ourselves. In fact, I'm going to give you 3 P's here today that we see in this resurrection account that really help us to see and experience who God is. And let me tell you that we experience trembling and astonishment with all 3 of these. The first one is this. I'd love for you to write this down somewhere. Is that trembling and astonishment sees us when we experience God's power. I was meeting with one of our church members just a couple weeks ago. His name is John, and John's a really smart guy. His whole professional career studied plants. He worked for Bayer. He's now retired. And we were having a conversation, and I said to John, I go, as a scientist, John, there's a lot of people in your field that don't believe that there's a God. Why do you believe in a God? And he looked at me and he said this, one word, photosynthesis. I mean, you know what photosynthesis is, right? I mean, that we as human beings, we learned this in elementary school, right? We as human beings, we produce carbon dioxide. That's just how we breathe. And then what plants do, which we are dependent upon plants, by the way, because with sunlight and water and through this process known as photosynthesis, they give oxygen so that you and I can breathe. And it's astonishing how God has created that when he spoke creation into being, this is what he put into place. And John wrote me a follow-up email to that, and he was like, Pastor, I need you to know this, that the process of photosynthesis has been described as being deceptively simple. I mean, you guys probably already know this, but I'll just read it for you here today. Photosynthesis is green plants occurred in the chloroplasts, which are specialized organelles. The sunlight is absorbed by chlorophyll molecules. There are actually 2 types which absorb light at different wavelengths. Yeah, obviously, John. There are a series of light reactions, photosystems 1 and 2, and produce a reducing agent in energy, and then a dark reaction that's known as... No, not photosynthesis, Calvin's cycle. Come on, guys, right? To convert the CO2 to carbohydrate. I don't pretend to recall all the intricacies, John said, but suffice it to say, there was an entire chapter of my graduate biochemistry text devoted to photosynthesis. And check this out, he said this to finish. And some researchers still spend their careers going even deeper. When we experience God's power, we are filled with astonishment. People to this day are still studying the wonders of how this world is put together. But I don't know about you, when I hear that too, it kind of leaves me in a space of some emotions of trembling too. I mean, we as people are so dependent as human beings, and we like to think that we're strong. We like to think that we're independent, but we are dependent upon what God has created. And it leaves us with some kind of trembling unless you know the one who has the power. See, the angels, when the women appeared to the tomb, they had these words to say to them in Mark chapter 16, verse 6. And the angel said to them, "Do not be alarmed that you seek Jesus of Nazareth who was crucified. He has risen. He is not here. See the place where they had laid him." See, the God who spoke into being the universe that we continue to study, the photosynthesis that we continue to study, is the same God who rose Jesus from the dead. it leaves us in this place of emotions of astonishment and trembling. They seize us when we experience God's power, but also when we experience God's promise. The second thing, because God's promise is something that he holds to. In fact, that's the next thing that was told to the women at the tomb. In verse 7, it says this, "But go tell his disciples and Peter that he is going before you to Galilee. There you will see him just as he told you." Our God, the one that we worship here today, is not random. He's somebody who holds his end of the bargain. And he's made incredible promises to you and me. The love that he brings is different than any other kind of love that we will experience in this world. One of my favorite authors, a guy named Tim Keller, he wrote it this way. It's a wonderful quote talking about the promises of God and the love that he brings that's different than anything else in the world. He says, "To be loved but not known is comforting but superficial. To be known and not loved is our greatest fear, but to be fully known and truly loved is, well, a lot like being loved by God." It's what we need more than anything. It liberates us from pretense. It humbles us out of our self-righteousness, and it fortifies us for any difficulty life can throw at us. See, God holds his end of the bargain. But what we also know about God is that he knows your deepest secret. He knows your greatest insecurity and anxiety. And because of that, it leaves us in this place of a bit of trembling. Because we're broken people. We've been going through this season of Lent in the church year, and how many of you have noticed these banners that we had hanging up in the church here? All right, okay, good. Yeah, so we started this journey after Ash Wednesday where you showed up to worship and you saw these banners that were hanging there, right? And they were full and complete. But what we saw as we were going through this series called Broken is that we saw how these banners became ripped and torn. We were looking at these people in the book of Genesis, and we talked about how we too are broken people. But it's not just that we are broken, but we live in a broken world as well that is torn apart. And while we contribute to that brokenness, we are affected by that brokenness as well. But let me tell you some good news. That God certainly knows your brokenness. He knows my brokenness. And his promise is that he has come in to restore and repair it. It's led him to his passion, which is the third P here today. That trembling and astonishment seize us when we experience God's power, God's promise, and God's passion. See, what these banners represent is this old, ancient Japanese art that's known as kintsugi. Say it with me. 1, 2, 3. Kin. It's this process that is done of where it takes kin, which is that word gold, and sugi. It reconnects something. It repairs it. It's this beautiful art that has been used in some cultures. And so when you look at these banners, what you're looking at now is you're seeing something that has been repaired. It has been restored. It has been made whole again. Just like this cup here, that while it was broken at one point in time, that when you use it, it is still something that is repaired and restored. It is able to hold it. Its utility is brought back. But the beauty of what kintsugi is it's not just a process to restore something like how Brian has to take his car to the mechanic all the time. All right, you didn't think that was funny. That's okay. But it's something that makes it so much more valuable, better than what it was before. And I don't know if I need to make this connection for you here today, but this is what Easter is all about. What Easter is all about is our God has entered into this world, this broken world, and he has come and lived the perfect life that we could not live. He would go to the cross for you and me, and he would rise again from the dead to repair it, to restore it, to work through brokenness. And we experience that hope right now in that we are forgiven, but we wait and we yearn for his return where he will repair and restore everything again. Somebody say amen to this news. This is why today matters. And it leaves us with emotions of astonishment. Astonishment that God would love us more than our greatest failure or our greatest achievement. But it also leaves us with some trembling because the things that we try to place into that spot, like our own plans, like the good job or the family or the retirement funds, those things will fade. But the hope that Jesus brings is something that will last forever. And we need it right now. So, to Flu's question, what would have to happen or occur? There we go. What would have to occur or to have occurred to constitute for you a reason to at least consider the existence of a superior mind? My answer, and I hope your answer would be as well, that Jesus the Christ would have to rise from the dead. And he did. He did. And so trembling and astonishment seize us when we experience God's power, when we experience his promise, and when we experience his passion. And all three of these things are evident and clear and true in his resurrection. That's why today is a big deal. And I pray that you would join us in this journey as a church as we continue to ponder and look toward the goodness of who our God is. Christ is risen.